wasn't to target the Jewish community or some such. I don't think you had the impression that that FBI agent meant to undermine the fears and the dangers that Jews face in America. But it did speak to this insidious difficulty that is always faced when trying to prove that anti-Semitism does create dangers for all of us.
There's no question. I mean, I think that the FBI worked so heroically over the weekend to ensure the safe release of those 4 people. And I think we owe them a debt of gratitude. And yet the special agent in charge got it wrong when he said Judaism or anti-Semitism wasn't an issue. Ali, let me just be clear. Anti-Semitism was exactly the issue. The idea that someone believes that the Jews control the government, the Jews control the media, these are some of the oldest canards around. They've been used over hundreds and thousands of years to persecute, to justify, rationalize the persecution and ultimate slaughter or expulsion of the Jewish people. And I mean, you know, I send my kids to Hebrew school to learn Torah, not tactical maneuvers. And so I find it really aggravating when I've heard some people say over the last few days, you know, oh, he was deranged, he was mentally ill. No, he was evil. Going into a synagogue with the idea that you're going to take people hostage is a sick and sinister thing to do. And, you know, I think it really starts with words, Ali. You know, I mean, whether we have people on the far right make crazy conspiratorial claims about George Soros, or again, the Jews having controlling this, or people on the far left talking about polite Zionists as their enemies, making wild claims about the Jewish state. We need people across the board, no matter what your politics or your partisan leanings, to say, no, stop. Like, anti-Semitism isn't just ignorance, it's explosive and it kills people. We're just really lucky tonight that no one died in Texas, you know, this past weekend.
Yeah, we are. Alexei, you've been covering Democratic candidates at the state level. I was just asking Joyce what the Department of Justice can do in the effort to sustain voting rights. What are some state level candidates doing?
Yeah, as I just mentioned, as we look across the country, not just at sitting Democratic governors, but Democratic candidates for governor across the country are starting to unveil their own plans for voting rights, their own plans for democracy. Ali, I know you know this. That's not typical in election years. You don't usually see candidates unveiling plans around voting and democracy, healthcare, the economy, immigration, sure. Not something like this. And that's speaking to the moment that we're in. It's folks in Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, New Mexico, really across the country saying that they believe Democratic governors in particular are the last line of defense for democracy, given the way that Republicans across the country are implementing and introducing these restrictive voting measures. And again, the way that Congress is failing to pass anything on the federal level. So I don't think this is something you're actually going to see slow down. I think we're going to see a number of Democratic candidates, not just gubernatorial candidates, but other statewide candidates starting to get into this lane and really propose their own state level issues because of what's happening or not happening on the Hill.
It's been decades since the average American thinks of themselves as a foot soldier for democracy and thinks about their vote as actually being about preserving democracy, Alexei. Joyce, I was talking to the Congressman Jamie Raskin, who's a part of the January 6th committee yesterday, about the powers of that committee, what it can or can't do in terms of subpoenas and other members of Congress. Here's what he told me.
Look, we've got the power under Article 1 of the Constitution to set the rules of our own houses. We have the right to discipline members all the way up to the point of expulsion. And the Speech and Debate Clause says that members of Congress cannot be questioned for their legislative activity outside of Congress, which clearly implies that within Congress, we have the authority to do that.
I always enjoy talking to Jamie Raskin, but he's a super smart guy and lawyer, and I need you to help us make sense of what he was saying.
Well, I think his constitutional scholarship is just dead on point here. It seems very likely to me that the committee can, in fact, subpoena members, that it has that power. The problem that they're going to face is what are they going to do about it when some of those members refuse to show up and testify? So that's the real problem that they have to sort out in advance of deciding what to do. Will they go to the Justice Department and ask the Justice Department to engage in criminal prosecutions? You know, that's fraught, and we're still waiting on a decision by DOJ about whether it will enforce the subpoena against the White House Chief of Staff by prosecuting him like they've already begun to prosecute Steve Bannon. And then alternatively, Congress might decide to go to civil court to try to enforce these subpoenas. But that, too, is fraught. There's the question of whether the courts would get in the middle of a dispute between the members. And as we all know, civil litigation takes time. So this is a complicated and difficult decision. It's interesting to note that Liz Cheney appears to be the assertive member on this panel, insisting that these subpoenas should issue.
Right. That might that might be something our viewers think is unusual, that one of the two Republicans on the committee want to take a more aggressive stance on this than perhaps even the Democrats do. But Jamie Raskin seems to be behind that as well. Jonathan, let's talk about another topic you and I were discussing yesterday, and that is extremism in general and the threat that it poses to democracy. It's part of this larger conversation we're having. What we saw in Colleyville yesterday was one small thing, and it didn't end up being it didn't end up having the worst result, but we are in an environment where extremism thrives in America.
There's no doubt. I mean, I think we kid ourselves when we believe there's some natural law that dictates that democracy will persist forever unless we fight for it. We've got to work to protect and preserve the liberties that are enshrined in the Constitution. When we have an environment where people think it's normal for an armed militia to literally overtake the Capitol, to assault police officers. And keep in mind that what happened on January the 6th wasn't a surprise to us at ADL. We track extremists, and we've seen, for example, their efforts to take the Capitol in Lansing, Michigan, their efforts to attack the Capitol building in Oregon, and we hear what they're saying. And so I think, look, extremism is a dangerous chemical that can combust and destroy our democracy. So it's incumbent upon all of us who care about this to recognize there's no silver bullet, right? There's no magic wand we can wave. It's going to require all segments of society, Republicans and Democrats. It's going to require businesses and civil society organizations like the ADL to come together and push back and kind of reclaim our democracy. Whether you are conservative or liberal, we all have a stake in liberal democracy being preserved and continuing to flourish.